Hey everyone, welcome back to Crypto Cash. Thanks again for joining me here. Hope you're having a great day. We got a good 10 plus subscribers here joining the channel here from yesterday's video, even though it was super low views and just overall people are just not even caring about watching these kind of videos. It's deeply appreciative that you hit the like button and obviously subscribe and enable notifications if you can. What we want to look at first of all, and what we'll talk about today, of course, is this potential head and shoulders pattern forming. I say potential because we pretty much got to retest this local area here, this range of 95.5 to 96.5 first. But there's a distinct probability if we see that upper range here, then there's a good chance we go a little bit lower from there. So I think further downside overall makes sense, but I wouldn't be surprised we see just kind of a manipulative little pump this weekend here to squeeze out some of these shorts. And the shorts I'm referring to can be found here on my Twitter, Telegram, and Discord. I got this play out chart here essentially for you. And those levels are about 96,000 seems to be that local chunk of liquidation. So I think 96K will happen before 94,000. But once more, there's no guarantees, obviously. We just want to kind of pay attention to that. And obviously, we're going to look at liquidation and some back-end data here too. So be sure to stick around. We got a good one today. Let's take a look. All right, folks, first thing we're going to look at here is just a quick update on the overall scenario here for the CME gaps that are forming currently at this point. There's new ones that are forming, some older ones. Just want to kind of make sure you're aware of that. This does incentivize the price to go a bit lower here. Bitcoin has three, one at 88,000 to 89K, one at 91 to 91.3, and the local one here essentially that's kind of filled. We got a wick, but not an actual candle body close there at 94.5 to 95,000. So those are kind of three areas there for Bitcoin. ETH and Solana are all there available as well. That is actually pinned on my profile here under highlights for my Twitter, Telegram, and Discord too. So if you're wanting access to that, feel free to jump on over there. Now, what I want to talk about here with order blocks is just that there's way more buy orders below the price than above the price. That does tell us that probably the likelihood of slightly further upside makes more sense. That is consistent with the liquidation range above the price here with the current price point. Now, I think I have that highlighted here as well, just kind of give you some perspective. 96,000 is that local area that we could very well see hit here next. That's just that little chunk just above the local resistance of 95,700. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a low volume pump this weekend, just to kind of hit that level. What we want to look at here isn't the sectors. I think it's liquidation that's probably the most telling. We have more liquidation on the downside in the 24-hour period, which is perfectly normal. But when we look at the larger timeframes, this kind of reaffirms further downside potential as well. When we see 93,300 as that next significant outlier with a big chunk between 94.5 and 93.5, right? So that's kind of the last 7 days worth of liquidation. So it makes sense for the price to pull back to that level. But it also makes sense for the market makers to trap, late longs right now, early shorts too as well. Kind of both directions there, and sweeping those things there. So one of two things happens: we either see 96.5 and a rejection there for a cup and handle, for the head and shoulders pattern for the price pullback, which is highlighted here, or we continue a bit lower here first to sweep that lower liquidation. Both scenarios exist. This is Schrodinger's Bitcoin, and that's kind of how it's going to work moving forward, right? You got to kind of place the odds in your favor by looking at more areas of confluence. So see if we can identify that. And just quickly understanding here, we've already looked at liquidation. Let's double check open interest. 94,300 right there at that local support is that area of support for Bitcoin. Secondary to that is 93,000. So we do end up blasting through 94K or retesting 94K. 93,000 is the likely next target. Okay, not just based on the liquidation, but also open interest. These work like magnets in a lot of ways, right? So it does suggest that we could see 90 to 89,000 again. All right, so just putting it out there as a possibility of that. For right now, though, liquidation long delta is high. So that kind of tells us we have more bulls than bears in the market, and that is generally favorable. It's inherently more risky to short, but it's also more likelihood of the price pulling back too, because there's a lot of late longs here, right? Too many longs in the market. People are trying to take those breakout trades because XYZ influencer said, oh, we got an Elliott wave special, wave 15, and we're going to be going up a little bit higher. That is something that you want to be careful of course. But the general concept here is that we see 96,000 as a distinct probability here more locally, but obviously we cannot, look away or ignore the fact that 94,000 to 93K has a pretty big chunk. So that seems more sensible. But to me, just based on how weekends have been playing out, I wouldn't be surprised if we see the price go up before it goes down. That's just kind of what I'm leaning a little bit more towards. I hope I'm wrong and it goes down for those who are trying to short right now, but it's just so common right now to see those things happen. Anyways, daily time frame, let's quickly understand where we're at. Once more, we closed pretty soundly above that $94,000 range. So good news is 94K should work as a support. So hypothetically, we test that level, price bounce from there, we go up. But there is still a significant fair value gap here below the price, as low as 92,500. So there's that. There's also this 0.618 fib level there too on this local retracement range, kind of just letting us know that there's a distinct probability that we can continue lower, right? So just be mindful of that. We're not in a position right now where you should be, betting everything and thinking we're going to go to 100,000, and you shouldn't be betting everything at 90,000 either, right? We're kind of in that middle of the range, and until we prove to go in either direction, based on these local supports and resistances, there's no reason to consider taking a trade. Okay, don't force trades right now. 4-hour time frame kind of lets us know that we're just ranging here, for lack of better terms. Our tentative range is 94,000 to 96,000. That's the rough estimate for you. Breaking above 96K to me feels like a trap, so I'm looking forward to hopefully getting a short in that range. If that doesn't happen, then potentially a long in the 93 to 94K range. Rough estimate. All right, that can totally change between now and then, though, right, folks? You got to understand, reevaluating Bitcoin every single day is a consistent thing you have to do. That's why you see so many people covering this coin. It's just kind of the premise there. It's kind of the big dog. It makes sure that, that everything else follows it for the most part. Anyways, last thing to recognize, we're still maintaining above 50 in the RSI. So we haven't broken bearish yet, but this is a slight divergence. When you see the price going up and the RSI going down, that can be a shift in momentum too. So we're going to be mindful of that. Right now, far too early to tell, but there's not a lot of bearish divergences except for the fact that we have just a lot of liquidation below the price, and that could very well incentivize it to go lower. So just some friendly advice here. Be very careful taking a trade on this coin this weekend. I'm going to be waiting for that 95.7 to 96.5K range first before I consider a short, just because it feels a little too early right now. And then the inverse as well. Definitely not considering a long into resistance. I think that's a bad idea. You're still inherently more, even though it's more risky right now to short, it's the safer play, just generally speaking, the way things are looking right now. Okay, so try not to take a long at what feels like the top for the moment. If we can hold this range over throughout the weekend, we see some volume on Monday coming into that 96K range, it may be a different story. But for right now, hit the brakes, folks. We're not going to see anything monumental just yet. All right, folks, those are my thoughts. And what are yours? Why don't you comment below and please help grow the channel. Always like the videos, and feel free to join us too over at Bitunix as well, folks. Congrats to our community members here. We're going to soon to unlock some pretty awesome rewards here, and it's just really simple, easy money there. So be sure to use them, folks. They've been great to us. That's why I like to recommend them. And there is a discount on trading fees. Links down below for that. Okay. We'll look forward to seeing the next one. Thanks again. All right, folks, quick look here at Ethereum. It looks like we hit a nice little overextension there into that resistance at 3330. We discussed that yesterday, being a pretty obvious area of confluence. So just be mindful of that point of control, local high range that has some validity there, and the possibility of the price pulling back from here is greater because of that. Now, that doesn't mean you just short at that level, but we do want to kind of look at the comparison between Bitcoin and ETH and just see if there's anything of note. And if we do take a look here, we can kind of see, let's see, let's kind of zoom out and get the right time frames here. We are looking at a pretty obvious descending channel here for Bitcoin, and very similar too as well for ETH, right? So even though ETH is performing generally better than Bitcoin, the concept here remains the same. We're seeing a descending type of trend, and overall, this is generally positive. And what I want to emphasize there is, even though it's very similar in a lot of ways, we can see this local high range being broken where Bitcoin's hasn't yet. So ETH is actually legging up and doing pretty well. 3,300 is probably the new support level, based on that being that previous resistance range. So a lot of this depends on how Bitcoin performs, but I'm expecting a short-term push higher for for Ethereum, and then basically a potential correction as well once Bitcoin starts to hit its range. Okay, but ETH is looking pretty strong versus Bitcoin on the lower time frames if you kind of do a side by side in the last 12 hours. All that said, let's go ahead and take a look here. It looks like I pulled up the wrong charts. Apologize. Let's go with our primary one here. Ethereum, to reiterate and reaffirm in case you missed yesterday, 3260 is that local support based on open interest, and then resistance is 3381. Okay, so we're kind of in a range, for lack of better terms here. Open interest kind of letting us know we're definitively in the middle of that range. So when you're in the middle of a range, oftentimes it can be difficult to want to trade, just based on the simple fact that the price action is kind of, it's holding itself back in a lot of ways, or there's not a lot of meat left on the bone, right? From a range down trading perspective, shorting that 3,400 level makes a lot more sense than trying to short right now. Okay, just kind of the thought there. Anyways, liquidation long delta is still green or bullish. It's hard to increase versus that of Bitcoin. And we can see 3350 is that local area of liquidation, but there's not a lot close by, right? So when liquidation's been swept for the most part in the last weeks worth of trading, we're trending in the middle of a range. That doesn't give me a lot of confidence in wanting to take a trade, okay? Now, I would say if the price of Ethereum continues up higher and we start seeing close to a $3,400 price point and Bitcoin's at like 96.5, that would be an obvious signal to consider shorting because those are the two resistance ranges for both these coins, right? So that's just something I want to pay attention to right now. The local high is 33.30, and there's a good chance we do see a correction lower because of that, just based on this descending trend, right, that we're seeing with its lower high, lower low pattern. So all that being said, 4-hour time frame is still quite bullish. We're over 50 on the RSI. That's a very good sign. Stochastic is swinging up. We're over all moving averages, the important relevant ones. I'm just a little concerned with this significant a significant amount of value below the price. In other words, there's a fair value gap below the price here, and there's a good chance we do end up seeing that filled. So that does make me lean a little bit more towards wanting to short this coin, but also you got to recognize here, this is a pretty strong support range here, right? So 3,300 is that local support. So until we break this range, we want to presume it's going to continue to progress higher because there's still more reasons for that. So short-term bullish on Ethereum. I think from a macro structure, if Bitcoin were to start pulling back, I do think this fair value gap will get filled at some point. It just may not happen right away. Speaking of gaps, just to clarify, there are some pretty significant fair value gaps, or CME gaps rather, for Ethereum, which is 32.22. That's the lower range of that local one here, where the price wicked up really fast on a Tuesday. Okay, just pumped really quick. So there's a fair value gap that actually occurred during the weekdays. Previous weekend, 3,100, and then prior to that, of course, 3,000. So just some areas to pay attention to. But that's ETH in a nutshell for you folks. Hope that made sense. I described it correctly. Let me know what your thoughts are. Are you taking a long or short with ETH? Like, where are you at? What do you think you're going to do right now? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks again so much for being an awesome part of my life. We'll see you in the next one. Quick heads up to our traders. We got a 15% discount on trading fees if you use my link to register through Bitunix. Links down below in the description. All right, folks, let's take a quick look here at Solana, double check some important stuff. Specifically, we're going to talk about the CME gaps below the price, but this ascending type of channel that generally breaks to the downside. But also, more importantly, the short-term pairing with Bitcoin and how it has broken its local high structure where Bitcoin still has yet to do so itself. So with Bitcoin struggling to break that 95,700 level, Solana is poised and ready to leg up again if that happens for Bitcoin. So please understand Solana, even though it has progressed lower and pulled back quite significant, and we did actually collect some good profits on it. Let's go ahead and see. That was, what was it, 23% on our short, and our Bitcoin short 37%. Those profits were beneficial and very helpful to help offset that stupid SUI short that kind of wicked up on us, right? Anyways, trading isn't perfect. That's the easy way to understand it. But Solana was showing divergences. Now it's not. So don't attach yourself to a mindset that it's going to keep going down because of that. However, we do got to recognize some macro structure scenarios here. This higher high, higher low pattern is basically letting us know that a short-term reversal would make sense too, or perhaps even a macro structure reversal. Let's double check Solana backend and see once more, reaffirming 144 to 140 is kind of that support range. So the price still is yet to want to leave that level. So once we have a break of structure, when we can kind of have a different conversation. For right now, liquidation delta is kind of drawing flat. So it's generally not always the best identification of what direction we're going to head. 139 to 135 is a lower liquidation. 146 to 150 is upper liquidation. That's the last 7 days. Taking a look at the daily time frame, just to give you some perspective. Still mostly bullish on everything. We are starting to see a stochastic swing to the downside, but that's kind of slow going on the daily. Right? I prefer to look at the 4-hour time frame and kind of see where we're at here. If we do look at this, we can recognize that there is a type of, this is basically a rising wedge pattern. And oftentimes rising wedge patterns, they slowly lose momentum as they squeeze out and continue lower. It's rare for them to break to the upside. Not saying that Solana couldn't still make a run towards 150, but I think breaking 150 would be a pretty tall order. It's going to require Bitcoin to trend towards 100,000. So all that being said, the 4-hour time frame hasn't broken bearish, but it wants to, and the lower time frames are not looking super strong. So, if you kind of, with the exception of the hourly time frame, and just say in the last 24 hours, the 4-hour time frame is showing some divergences, and the daily time frame also reflects that we're seeing that rising wedge kind of pattern. The previous CME gaps are also what you want to be mindful of. I have those put on the chart here, 132 to 133 and 137 to 138. So those are kind of just some areas to pay attention to. So am I bearish in this coin? No. Am I bullish on it? No. You can be neither and still play your cards right, okay? So hypothetically, what I'm expecting right now is to see Bitcoin pump a little bit to the 96K range. If that were to happen, I'm going to be poised and ready to consider some shorts on just say the top 10. And then the inverse as well, if we see a pretty significant correction to the downside for Bitcoin to say 93, 94K, then maybe some longs at support. Between now and then, I'm going to be patient and try not to force any trades. And you shouldn't either. It's easier said than done. I totally get it, but it's the best strategy in this market. I hope that makes sense and it spoke to you. Please let me know if it did. Comment below, of course. Help grow the channel. Let's beat that algorithm, folks. This is pretty ridiculous for us to only get 1,000 views per video. I think that's pretty pathetic. Now, it's mostly the market. It's not you, but if you've been watching for a while, you'll know that this is a grind, right? Bitcoin, trading altcoins, everything it takes work. So I hope you understand what the work that goes into this here to help you out as well. So hope you have a good rest of your day. We'll see you in the next one. Thanks again so much for your time. Take care of yourself out there. All right, folks, quick look here at SUI, just kind of seeing kind of where we're at. We're right back into our normal range of roughly 177 to 188, just kind of maintaining right there at that point of control. So it's generally favorable to be in that range. And if we look at the combination of SUI to Bitcoin, it's performing a bit better. Most altcoins are like this, where they've broken through their local high structure, but Bitcoin still has yet to do so. So this does imply if Bitcoin were to break, just say 96,000, then the altcoins will probably surge, right? We'll talk about where and how far they could go, but for the most part, that's kind of what I'm expecting. Obviously, it's not a perfect world, and the probability of Bitcoin going much higher right now is pretty low, but it just feels like we're going to see some kind of manipulation of that 96K range, and if that happens, I think taking shorts right now is inherently kind of risky. We probably want to wait a little bit longer. Granted, we might miss an opportunity. That's perfectly fine. Trading, if you're not familiar, is full of missed opportunities. Taking a look at SUI, we can double check here. Just recognize 177, 185, and 191 are the three areas of open interest, basically support and resistance zones. Liquidation delta is still bearish. Is one of the few coins that has a bearish type of liquidation delta, basically just suggesting that there's more people shorting this coin than taking longs with it, which I totally get because there's more liquidation on the downside that's closer to the price, right? So that's kind of the general structure there. Daily time frame also, keep in mind, is still quite bullish. And what I mean by that is based on range-bound trading. You can see this local low here is 177 and the local high is 188. Okay, that's just kind of the macro range that we're looking at and that we're working within. So hypothetically, range-bound trading at this point, we hypothetically should see 188 before we see anything lower. Okay, just based on the overall sense of continuing higher, right? So that's kind of the general structure there. Everything else looks still pretty bullish on the daily time frame. This coin has that indication because it pumped so hard so quickly in the short amount of time. It's going to look bullish for a while. So it's kind of a false positive in a lot of ways. Now, when it comes to the 4-hour time frame, this is more transitionary. We're still maintaining below or at 50 on the RSI. It's not necessarily a favorable sign. I don't like to take trades into that. So my speculation here is that SUI is going to continue to range bound until it stops, obviously. But between now and then, we're in the middle of the range. Why force a trade? Why not wait for the 180s before you consider shorting? And what I mean by that more so the upper 180s, like 188 to 190, and then the inverse as well. If we see just say a low 170, 160, that would be a better consideration for a long. So me personally, I just don't like to force trades, especially when you're in the center of a range. So that's kind of where I'm at. I could be way off base. I hope I am, so you can do well with your trades. But why don't you let me know, comment below, what are you trading here? Are you trading SUI, trading altcoins? And if so, what are your positions? I'd love to hear it. Thanks again so much. We'll see you in the next one.